Greetings and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting and a joint meeting with the school board. Started for 6:30. Let the record reflect that all the council is present, as well as all the school board members. Let the record also reflect that Superintendent Ray will not be with us this evening. He is in a conference. So with that, I'd like to open the floor. This is the recap, the budget recap that was put into the charter for June. As we all know, the budget passed, which is great because that funds our schools, so great job, everyone. And so this is just the budget recap. We do have an audit presentation afterwards. School board, you're more than welcome to stay. This is an audit presentation by RKO that is really presented to the council and the school board, so feel free to stay and hear all about the city's position. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any school board member or counselor that would like to speak in the joint meeting with the school board. Okay. I would just like to thank the school board for all your hard work in the budget and putting forward a budget that puts students first. So thank you very much. With that, if there's nothing else, we will move forward. Okay, moving forward, I call this meeting to order. We did the recognition of members present. I'd like to invite everybody to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for that. Just under general this evening, I want to take the opportunity to recognize C.K. Burns and the 100th anniversary. C.K. Burns School was built in 1922. It was named after Clementine Kendrick Burns, a beloved citizen and business owner here in Saco, and a prominent figure in the women's suffrage movement in the early part of the century. Clementine passed away in 1922, and the city of Saco named the school C.K. Burns in her honor. It was opened as a junior high school, preparing students for entrance to Thornton Academy, right down the street. Over time, the school has developed into an elementary school, serving over 600 third, fourth, and fifth grade students. In the past year, bulletin boards were created by students researching the fashion, trends, and popular events of the decades between 1920 and today. Students also discovered many interesting facts about the history of the school, such as the fact that the building originally only had 8 classrooms, and it now has 34. On June 14th, I had the great opportunity to attend the school-wide assembly at the C.K. Burns School to celebrate. The students sang a school anthem that was discovered while researching the history of the school, and I would like to thank the staff and the students at C.K. Burns for doing the research to learn the history of their school and our community. So thank you very much. With that, we will move into committee correspondence to council. Any committee correspondence this evening? Councilor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. I have 2 committees to report on. First of all, the Bedford-Saco Old Orchard Beach Transit Committee the board met last week. We have gone ahead and approved their budget for the 2022-23 year. Happy to report that Executive Director Hyde and his staff continue to seek ways to increase revenues while attempting to control expenses, which is no small feat these days. There are some routes that were temporarily suspended based on the fact that we had no drivers, so there's a staffing issue. Just wanted to alert the public to that. If we are able to successfully find drivers, then reopening those suspended routes can be reconsidered. Ridership is about 60% of pre-pandemic level, but the good news is it's rising, so that's a plus for BSUP Transit. And you may have noticed that the summer trolley schedule is in place, so those trolleys are going from one community, all 3 communities. Very popular transportation mode for this area at this time of the year. And the 2 electric buses that were acquired are in service, so keep your eyes open. You may see an electric bus coming by. They're quite efficient and a good step for us in terms of reducing our carbon footprint. The second committee I'd like to report on is the age-friendly Saco group. They had a board meeting again last week. I was busy last week. They continue to consider expanding services. They're doing a fabulous job of assessing need and coming up with creative ways to address those needs. They are solidifying their efforts on the on-demand transit program in conjunction, hopefully at some point, with BSUB Transit. And as we all know, we did have budget amendments that helped fund a sort of a transitional strategy to the next budget year. That's it. Thank you, Mayor Doyle.
Thank you. Any further committee correspondence at this time? Moving on to item 5, which is public comment. There's nobody that signed up ahead of time. So at this time, if there's anybody who would... If there's anyone who would like to address the council, please come forward and be heard. State your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, how are you? My name is Sean Walker, one of the proud new owners down at Hewitt Seafood, and my partner over there, Alan Waugh. We came tonight to introduce ourselves and let you guys know how much we want to be a part of the community and how important it is to us. I grew up in Saco and went to Saco schools and graduated from Thornton Academy in 2003. Grew up riding my bike in Camp Ellis and fishing off the jetty and getting ice cream from Maxie's and getting Jake cakes from Braley's. So Camp Ellis holds a special place in my heart. And we just want to bring attention back to Camp Ellis. And I know that you guys have been working hard with SOS and acquiring a dredge and kind of bringing attention back to Camp Ellis and our shores and dealing with the erosion issues. And part of coming forward tonight is back in probably 1990, I was 5 years old, we used to do an event down at Camp Ellis called the Camp Ellis Harbor Fest, where there was a boat parade, a bike parade, the governor showed up, there was vendors and games, and it just was something that I hold close to my heart that was really fun back in the day. And wanted to propose possibly doing something like that again to kind of bring attention back towards the beaches of Maine. And I think that it's a big part of Saco and that we could really emphasize and kind of grow off of down there, that it has so much potential. I've seen over the years that it's kind of started to just fade. And if it wasn't really for Hewitt's, you know, thank God that my partners and I acquired it and kind of kept it going and didn't get torn down and turn into condos or, you know, so it's awesome, really awesome to be a part of it. So wanted to come forward, introduce myself and my partner, and thank you for, you know, working with SOS and, you know, working on acquiring that dredge. And just want to see what your thoughts were on a potential event down at Camp Ellis again to really do something special down there, like when I was a kid, and kind of get something awesome going back down there again. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
If there's anyone else who would like to speak before the council, please come forward and be heard. Seeing nobody else seeking recognition, moving on to item 6, approval of the minutes for June 6, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion on the minutes? Roll call on the minutes. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to approve the minutes. That brings us to item 7, consent items. There's 2 items. A contract zone agreement dissolution of 201 North Street, page 2 in your packet, And item B, asset forfeiture, State versus Dares, page 3 in your packet. Is there a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Councilor Berman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote on the consent agenda. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to approve the consent agenda. Brings us to item 8, action items, and up first is item A, an audit presentation from RKO.
I was told I had to press one button.
Hasn't built yet.
Bear with us, everyone, as we navigate some technology glitches.
Going to make Glennis eat her words.
All right.
Do I need to be connected to a Wi-Fi or anything?
I don't think so, but I always am. I don't know why it's launching. This is,
Have you used your computer before?
let's switch.
Yeah.
Glennis, should we take a couple-minute recess so you can work on this?
Telling me to install and restart. All right, let's take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, it's 6:45. Let's take a 5-minute recess. Let's try to be back here by 6:50, please.
All right. I appreciate you having me tonight. I have a brief presentation to go through. As you can see, there's about 18 slides touching on some of the highlights of the June 30, 2021 audit. We would have loved to have presented this sooner, but as with everything the last year or so, it was delayed. But I'm here now, and we're going to go over some of the highlights, starting off with some of the audit results, and then I'll take you through some of the.
Would it be possible to email that to the council? Because it looks like we're not going to have that.
Can you do?
Oops. Hey.
And w-
All right, I think we're all set now, right? Everybody can see?
Yes,
All
my
right.
apologies for the interruption.
That's no, it's quite all right. I want everybody to play along here. As I was saying, I'm going to go through a quick summary of the audit results, and then I'll dive into some of the financial highlights, going over the city general fund, focusing on the revenues and expenditures and the fund balance, and then we'll show you some charts comparing you to some other towns and cities to see where you stand comparatively. So first off is a summary of the audit results. You'll see the first bullet point there is the financial statement opinion is unmodified. You're probably wondering what the heck that means. Well, an unmodified opinion is a clean opinion. It's exactly what you want from an auditor. Anytime we have to modify our opinion, that means we have to include something in your report that's bad. The more language we add to our reports, the thicker our reports are, is usually a bad thing. So when we don't have to modify it, it's very good. And I will make a point to kind of let you know that, Glennis does a great job preparing the annual comprehensive financial report. It's a very big document, has a lot of great information in there. I encourage you to read that if you have the time. If anything I go through tonight sparks your interest, there's definitely a lot more information that can be found in there. But that is all information that comes from Munis, from the financial system here at the city. The only thing that's actually ours in that report is the 3 pages as the opinion. So everything else comes from the audit records here. The second bullet point you'll notice there is the reports required by government auditing standards. In that report, we detail some of our responsibilities as auditors. Our responsibility as auditors is to give an opinion on the financial statements as to whether or not they're fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with all accounting policies and procedures and practices. I use the terminology in all material respects. It's basically a fancy way of saying we do a risk-based approach. We do sample-based testing. We do not test 100% of all transactions. So there is a margin of error built into our test procedures. You'll see there we report no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, or other comments. Anytime we go through the audit process, we assess risk, we test transactions with the objective of offering an opinion on the financial statements. But another byproduct of the procedures that we do is that we're able to offer some recommendations to streamline your internal procedures or to improve efficiency. And we're required to classify those recommendations into 3 categories. As I mentioned, material weakness being the most severe. You really don't want to have one of those in your audit report. Next level down is significant deficiency. Again, we didn't have any of those to report. And then lastly, there's just kind of other comments. So having none of those to report is a very good thing. Usually I go somewhere and I have at least some other comments to kind of help you improve procedures and things like that. There really wasn't anything here that I could point to that I need to put into writing. There's little things here and there throughout the time that we're here doing the audit that we discuss with Glennis or we just discuss with Jason at the school to help them along, but nothing serious enough to make it into our reports. The last big bullet point there is the reports required by the Uniform Guidance. The Uniform Guidance covers our testing of all federal grants that are passed down to the city. Again, we don't test all the federal grants that the city receives and expends during the year. We test a sample. We do a risk-based assessment to figure out which ones are deemed high risk, and we test those ones, and we kind of rotate through them year after year, trying to touch on different grants every year. In 2021, we tested the Child Nutrition Cluster and the Coronavirus Relief Fund. That was a very large program during 2021. Several $1 million flowed through there, flowed through to the school district, and a little bit over here at the city. There were no findings or issues that we have to report that would say you were not compliant with any federal requirements. Any questions on any of that stuff before I move on to some of the financial highlights? All right. This next slide shows the city general fund, the fund balance. Focusing the next couple slides on the general fund, you have a whole bunch of different funds within the city accounting structure, but the general fund is by far the largest fund. It's where most of the transactions flow through, so that's where we're choosing to focus on tonight. And the fund balance is basically your equity. It's, once you take all your assets and satisfy all your liabilities, what would you have left over to work with? So in 2021, you can see a pretty healthy fund balance in total, just over $11 million. Most of it being the unassigned category. There's certain categories of fund balance. Unassigned, as you would imagine, is not really dedicated to any one particular purpose. There's other categories like committed, assigned, and restricted. You really want to try and keep most of your fund balance in the unassigned categories because it allows you more flexibility to utilize that fund balance. It's kind of like a surplus that you can use for future spending if you need be. So you'll see over the last couple of years that purple section has kind of grown, which affords you a little bit more flexibility to weather the storm and to handle anything that's unexpected. And so the fund balance increased approximately $1 million over the prior year. And how did that happen? You can look at the budget to actual for the revenues, and you can see in total about $249,000 of that $1 million came from increased revenue collection. Primarily, you'll see the tax category was over budget. In this case, over budget being a good thing means you collected more than you anticipated. Primarily due to higher excise taxes. During 2021, vehicle sales were still pretty good, so you're collecting taxes on those new vehicle sales. License and permits, again, that one was a little bit over budget as well. The housing market and building and development still going strong during 2021, so increased collections there. Intergovernmental over budget. Primarily due to an increased state revenue sharing that came down the line after the budget was created. Charges for services, that one's actually under budget for the fiscal year, primarily due to the recreation program not being able to operate in its full capacity, therefore there was a lot less revenue collection in that program. And some of the other things that I'll point out on this slide, the budgeted utilization of surplus, the carryover assigned fund balance, that relates directly to the previous slide that I talked about, that fund balance. A lot of times the city will utilize prior surplus, prior fund balance to kind of level out the taxes so they don't have to increase the burden on taxpayers. So that gets included in the budget here, but it's not an actual true revenue source. You're utilizing funds that you basically already collected. So that's why you see that huge variance there and there's nothing in the actual column. On the expenditure side, Most of the budget to actual variances that you see here are the result of wages and benefits. By far, your number one spending category is wages and benefits. So anytime that you're over or under budget, that's usually the explanation. And for 2021, there were various open positions and employee turnover during the year, which actually helped you realize a little bit of savings during the year. The one category being significantly over budget would be the unclassified category. That's where there are certain grant funds that were unanticipated. They kind of get lumped into that category and expended through that category. So it's kind of a little bit misleading because those are grant funds that came in after the fact that were expended for their various purposes. On the school side of things, again, looking at the fund balance, in 2019, the school had a positive fund balance, and then in 2020, it kind of dipped down into the negative. 2021, it improved a little bit by about $275,000. And the reason for that being is that the revenues here, you can see that there were some increased collections for the state subsidy. Again, minor changes after the budget was passed. The state passed through a little extra funds down your way. Other intergovernmental sources, state agency clients, medical reimbursements, also over budget. Very difficult to predict those. It's based on the number of students participating in those programs and the state reimbursement. Generally, those categories are budgeted pretty conservatively. Other items that came in over budget, tuition fees, again, based on the number of students in the program, you get higher enrollments than what was originally anticipated. So that all came down to a bottom line increased collections of about $108,000 on the school side. On the expenditure side of things, there was about $191,000 of total savings realized in regular instruction, school administration, transportation under budget because of decreased sports programs during the year, or certain unfilled positions that didn't obviously materialize because of staffing shortages. And also because of the fewer bus runs for sports and other activities like that, there was less maintenance required. So there's quite a bit of savings there in the transportation category. System administration, that was over budget for additional legal fees, a lot of it related to how to navigate the COVID pandemic and consultation with Drummond Woodman and that, just trying to make sure that school is open and safe and, for all the students. This next slide shows you the unassigned fund balance as a percent of budget. The RKO recommends you have roughly 2 months' worth of expenditures in your reserve to handle any unexpected expenditures during the year. And so that equates to roughly about 16%. You can see when you factor in, when you look at the city general fund and the city school general fund combined and all the city funds, you're well within that recommendation of about 16%. In fact, you're over it. So that means your reserves are adequate according to the standard policy that RKO recommends, and that's also recommended by the GFOA. Here you'll see how that unassigned fund balance as a percentage of budget compares to other communities. Sacco is last couple of years has been above and beyond some of the local communities here, so you're sitting in a good position. Yet another chart looking at the fund balance showing you the breakdown of assigned and unassigned. And you can see over the last 10 years here, fund balance in general has grown pretty steadily, which is a good trend to see. And additionally, as I mentioned before, the unassigned fund balance has become a larger portion of that fund balance, meaning again, you have more flexibility to weather the storm if there are any unexpected circumstances, like a pandemic. On slide 12, there's the property tax collection rates. You can see that in the initial year of tax levy, you routinely collect about 97-98% of your taxes that are levied to citizens. And then in future years, continued collection efforts get that up right around to about 100%. You can see the bar chart there maxing out for all the previous years. Pretty darn close to 100% collection. Property tax rates over the last 10 years or so have been pretty level. Aside from 2013, pretty minimal increases, pretty level tax rates over the last 9 years. And again, that can be directly attributed to the use of an unassigned fund balance to kind of help reduce the tax burden on taxpayers. So it's good to have the unassigned fund balance to fall back on. Here you'll see the general fund expenditure distribution for 2021. Should be no surprise that large green category there includes the transfer out to the school department. Education is by far the #1 category for any town. Here making up roughly 50% of expenditures. And and the thing I like to point out on this slide is that if I were to take this slide and compare it to the next one in 2020, this used to work a lot better when you had paper and you can kind of overlay charts right on top of each other. But you'll notice there's really not a lot of difference from 2020 to 2021. The relative spending categories fluctuate a little bit year to year, but the variances are 1% or less in each category. So really, your spending categories are pretty consistent from year to year. This next slide is the long-term liabilities, basically your debt and other significant long-term liabilities. In 2021, there were no new bonds or anything like that issued. There were a couple new capital leases or finance purchases, about $2 million that were taken out during the year. So you see the finance purchases kind of creep up a little bit in 2021, but as all other regular bond and debt payments were made, the other categories kind of came down. The net pension and Opeb liabilities, those are based on actuarial estimates. There's a lot of things that go into that. I won't get into all of that. There's many, many pages within the financial statements themselves that go over all the assumptions and estimates that go into that. If you're curious, you can read that. That is, your retirement contributions and your health insurance liability for retirees, again, as determined by an actuary. Slide 17 shows you the debt per capita for the last 10 fiscal years. You'll see in 2018, there's a pretty big jump. That's when new bonds were issued in 2018. But then as you continue to pay down those bonds, you'll see the debt per capita kind of drop until you're going to issue some new debt in coming years. It'll jump back up again. And then comparing that to other cities again, Sacco's debt per capita, well below the rest within the state of Maine here. So again, it's a very good ratio, a very good situation to be in. And again, this can all be tied back to that use of assigned fund balance, or unassigned fund balance rather. You don't have to go out to bond debt or borrow money as much when you have adequate reserves. And that is a very quick highlight of 2021, some high-level highlights of the financial information. I know I ran through that pretty quick. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Thank you, and I'm sure some of these slides will look very different next year in the audit presentation due to some bonding. But just for folks that might not have caught it at the beginning, this is something we normally do as an audit presentation in January or February, but it's coming a little bit late, so that's why you're only getting numbers up to 2021. So just reminder to everyone. Any questions for RKO? From the council, school board? Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you for having me.
With that, we'll move on to item B, which is a May budget update from Director Salas.
Thank you. So I'll be presenting off the information that's available in the packet. So we won't try and continue to present on the TV. So budget report through May of 2022. The financials remain strong, as we just heard from the auditors. We did end last year closer, a little bit above the target of 16.67%, or 2 months expenditures. As of the end of May, we were actually at 23.17% of the adopted budget. Again, that kind of relates to the pacing of taxes. We received our second half tax bills in March. We're still enjoying a bit of the slush of the second half of that revenue, and then we'll be spending down expenditures through June. So it's unlikely we'll end the year at 23.17%, but we do retain a significant cash balance for the city to make good on its obligations. On the expenses side, capital projects, county tax, finance department, fire and ambulance, insurance, planning, police, school, solicitor, and supported entities are all on track because they are below forecast, but within 5 points. The rest of the departments I'll go in through by detail. The assessor department, 50% behind forecast. We talked about this a couple of times. The budgeted revaluation will not be occurring in this fiscal year. That was a one-time use of unassigned fund balance. We did not levy taxes for that project, and it will return to the unassigned fund balance at the close of the year. City administrator, 9% behind forecast. Base pay contracts and fees, all tracking behind. Some that has to do with the harbor master. There's a bit of a lag between appropriating the funds and then when that position was actually filled. Some of those funds have been encumbered for next fiscal year. The remainder will fall back to the unassigned fund balance. City clerk, 38% behind forecast. General assistance continues to be behind forecast. Year to date, it's behind by $82,000. Seasonal wages were also light since the November election was local rather than national. Code enforcement, 1% ahead of forecast. Code enforcement base pay has exceeded budget by $8,300 just due to some mid-year adjustments to the restructure. We have budgeted for the current structure into fiscal year 2023. Revenues still do exceed expenditures in total by $155,000, so this department does actually return some funds to the general fund. Additionally, our code enforcement officer, Dave Toomey, let me know that there is a pending payment above $100,000. So if that hits in June, that will bring that account largely in line. We are also looking to book some additional impact fees that might improve revenues for the code enforcement line. I'm just working to get the final account numbers for that. Communications, 9% behind forecast. Printing, software fees, and minor equipment are the major drivers here. Communications has encumbered some funds related to printing for projects in fiscal year 2023. Contingency is 13% behind forecast. Tax abatements were much lower than budgeted this year. We've had some big swings in that due to some of the timing of when abatements were booked and Betty related to COVID. The savings on tax abatements is partially offset by the Senior Tax Assistance Program, which exceeded budget in fiscal year 2022 by $14,000. The contingency account has $25,000 remaining through the rest of the year, inclusive of a $10,000 encumbrance of funds for the local match to the Maine Community Resiliency Grant Award, which was awarded to the City of Saco for a sustainability plan. The Energy Committee is actively working on that project. Council is 16% behind forecast. Travel and training lines are underutilized year to date. Fringe benefits is 1% ahead of forecast. Workers' comp and unemployment obligations have come in higher than anticipated. For fiscal year 2022, Human Resources is actively working to manage claims on both of those benefits. Grants, we've had 86,317 in grant and reimbursable expenditures to date. Human Resources 11% behind. Again, the department was not fully staffed until part of the way through the year. That's most of that. Information Technology is 9% behind forecast. A few software fees have not yet come in for payment. Supplies, travel, training, utilities are behind. We are working with the department to leverage some of these funds to extend one of our protection software packages into fiscal year 2023. Parks and Rec is 12% behind forecast. Base pay is underspent by $187,000 because of limited programming during the summer of 2021. Revenues are on track, only 1% behind forecast. As of the date of the report, Recreation was actually on track to exceed the budgeted total of $1,046,000 in revenues for full year FY 2022. So I took a quick peek at June. It looks like they are on track to exceed their total revenues. So congratulations to Ryan Summer, who steered that department through all the challenges of COVID and has brought their performance in terms of revenue and participation in programming back to where it was pre-pandemic. I have worked with Director Summer to encumber some of the funds, surplus available funds on the expense side for some needed projects for the coming year. Public Works is 10% behind forecast. Several projects for the spring season have been delayed, and funds will be encumbered for completion during the summer construction season. Some of the underspend is also related to staff openings in the department. It's very competitive, especially on the construction side, as I'm sure you are all well aware. TIF transfers are 6% ahead of forecast. Transfers were a little higher than our final budget based on final evaluations from the city assessor. TIF transfers are set by the assessor based on the final mill rate and valuations for those properties. And then under transfers, there's $7,000, which was transferred to the Wellness Fund as a result of a payroll withholdings reconciliation I completed in December. Are there any questions on the expenditure side?
Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Glennis, nice job. I thought it was very well presented. You explained this to me last year, and I really appreciated it, but I think for the general public, could you give a Cliff Notes explanation of what encumbering means?
Absolutely. So as we get to the end of the year, departments may not have spent their full budget. It could be because a project has only just been started but is set for completion. We allow our department heads to basically, it's called encumbering. You put in a request basically to reserve funds. So rather than having those funds fall to the unassigned fund balance, they show up again in fiscal year 2023 in the form of a slightly increased budget. So the department can retain those funds for needed projects without increasing the taxes for our taxpayers.
Any further questions? Please proceed.
On the revenue side, we have building rentals, communications, finance fees, interest earnings, recreation fees, public works fees, that's mostly excise, and real estate and property taxes all on track within 5% of forecast. Interest earnings, we were behind most of the year. We've had a little bit of a pickup in terms of our repurchase agreements and the rates there. We also had our annual rebate deposit occur in the last couple of months, so that's helped boost that line a little bit. But we are actively looking at investment advisor services to the city so we can get that back to where it should be given what the Fed is doing with interest rates right now. Getting into the details on some of the other departmental revenues, so assessor fees, there was $15,900 in tree growth tax in this year. City clerk revenues are 29% behind forecast. Again, this ties back to general assistance revenues, which are below forecast. And that's offset by the savings on the expenditure side because that's compensated back to the city by the state. All other clerk revenues are actually ahead of forecast by $12,000. So clerk department also very busy this year. Code enforcement revenues, we talked about that, it's 24% behind forecast. Development activity a little bit lighter, we're waiting on a pending payment. There's also a journaling of some code enforcement revenues that are going to be offset by TIF, credit enhancement agreement for a development project. So this number will probably be closer to budget by the end of the year. Grant revenues, we have received $95,617 in private and intergovernmental grant and reimbursements to date. Planning revenues are 17% behind forecast. There's some hours in contracted planning review that have not been billed to development escrows. I am working to restructure the way that planning escrows are built and billed starting in August. We've had ongoing challenges with our internal process. It's really just not working well within the system and the tools we have available to us. So we'll be closing the loop on that after our planned upgrade of our ERP in August. Police department revenues are 66% behind forecast. Parking fees and general revenues came in a little bit light this year. Thornton ended their agreement for an SRO through the police department. State assistance is $1.4 million above forecast, so state revenue sharing has come in quite strong. The allocation percentage in the biennial budget was very close to the mandated 5%. So those two factors have assisted us in that revenue line. That's largely offset by use of unassigned fund balance, which is also budgeted well above $1 million. Unallocated, we have $10,916 above forecast. So there were just several accounting adjustments that flowed through the revenue line. And use of fund balance, this is, of course, a placeholder line. So we do budget for revenues, but no revenues are actually ever booked. Are there any questions about the revenue side?
Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Just a couple of questions for you. The code enforcement revenue issue, I kind of get it, it'll catch up, but I'm wondering if, and this is just a general comment, if there's a need to perhaps reevaluate our fee schedules relative to development projects. I don't know the last time that had been reviewed. I've had a little bit of information come in from a constituent, just general information and comments. So I just throw that out there for consideration. Am I correct on the grant revenue piece, is it fair to compare the grant revenues to the grant expenses?
Yes, so grant revenues are a little bit higher than grant expenses. That's related to some billing that we've done over time related to a countywide vaccination initiative.
Okay.
We bill at the hourly rate plus the cost of benefits, about a 40% above the actual hourly rate of OT, so that's why it's a little bit higher.
Okay, so you've got a net there of about $9,000 roughly to the positive. Okay, thank you. I just wasn't sure if I could pull those two numbers together.
Yeah, sometimes, technically, they should be about the same, but sometimes you bill a little bit more in a reimbursement initiative, or maybe you expend the funds in 1 year, receive them another year, so that might result in a little bit of discrepancy between those two values.
Thank you. And one last comment. As you probably know by now, I love billing for money that we're owed, so I'm pleased that you've taken the initiative to work with the planning department to try to resolve that issue. So kudos to you and Jason for doing that.
Any further questions? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So I understand that Thornton has ended the school resource officer as far as the money, but are we still providing the school resource officer at Thornton at our cost?
I believe they have someone who's employed directly by Thornton. I thought I had saw Police Chief Clements. My understanding from my conversations with the police chief is that they have someone who's a security officer, but he's employed by Thornton Academy.
Okay.
And we do have a school resource officer that supports our public schools, so the middle school and elementary schools.
Okay. I just think, given the current light of things recently, that it's probably unwise of Thornton Academy to go that route, and we probably should consider in the future Saco providing that as we have in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Finance Director Salas, thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you want me to stay up for the next item? Or,
Just in case, school board members, thank you very much for staying through the audit presentation and the budget. By no means is this saying you have to leave, but we welcome you to stay through the rest of the agenda. But that's up to you, whether you'd like to stay or not. With that, I would like to move on to item C on page 11 in your packet, the approval of the City of Saco investment policy. Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. In preparation for selecting investment advisory services, the Finance Director has reviewed and revised the city's investment policy to better define the city's investment objectives, remove commercial paper from the list of allowable investments, and simplify standards for investment services. The nature of commercial paper has changed considerably in recent years, leading the GFOA to issue an advisory on this investment vehicle. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the changes to the City of Saco investment policy. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? Finance Director Salas, do you want to start with maybe a presentation or overview?
yeah, I could just provide a brief overview in addition to the comments. There were some very specific guidelines for broker-dealer services, but nothing that really addressed investment advisor services. Those are different kinds of investment services. And in general, the names of the organizations and certifications can change over time. So we just changed the requirement to be sort of the highest and best industry standard for those services, and put it to the department to do that research any time that the service might go out to bid. And then, yes, the nature of commercial paper has changed considerably. GFOA is sort of advising against it. The investment vehicle is securitized by more than what it used to be, and it's just less of a reliable investment offering. So we've cleaned that up.
Councilor Hatch, do you have a question?
Yes, and I have no problem with the content changes. There's just one issue that popped out to me, and I'm not sure if this policy was part of the scope of the audit activity that we just heard from, so forgive me if it has been. But if I could address you to the second paragraph in Section D, delegation of authority, just a suggestion, not necessarily a firm conclusion here, but I think that we could improve a little bit by having dual control over the decision-making. If I read the paragraph correctly, the treasurer, which in this case is you have the authority, and then you are required to just simply keep the city administrator fully apprised. And I think it might be healthy to consider that any investment transactions, any executions of investment activity might be dual signed off by both you and the city administrator. And I think that I think it helps both of you. I think it just gives some added, transparency to the transaction, which I think would benefit both you, particularly not having to be in sole control of that process.
Yep.
Okay? So just a suggestion for you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you. As I was reading this, I recognized, and I have no need to change it at this moment, it's no need to rush, but we don't really have a divestment policy for any markets that the city would be hesitant to invest in. Maybe for future, maybe at the next year or so, we can consider possibly some divestment markets that are out there in which the city just does not. I know the state of Maine has some within the oil industries and things like that. But if there's anything that the city would be interested in, again, no rush. It was more of a thought, and I didn't want to rush it by any means, but possibly a subsection on divestments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to approve the investment policy. Thank you, Director Salas, excuse me. Moving on to item D, a final reading, amendment to Saco City Code, Chapter 11, Elections, 11.9, Boundary Lines on page 19 in your packet. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. State law and the city charter and code require redistricting each decade in order that the election wards have roughly equal populations and may not differ in number of inhabitants by more than 10% of the inhabitants in the smallest district created. The redistricting presented for adoption is based on the 2020 census. The City of Saco hereby ordains and approves the second and final reading of Chapter 11, Elections, subsection 11-9, Boundary Lines.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't bore the council by rehashing the entirety of my previous arguments at the previous two readings, but I just want to reiterate for the public's benefit and for the benefit of the school board members who remained with us tonight, as these are their wards too, that the process, I'm critical of the process. I'm not critical of the performance of the staff. As always, our staff has performed at the highest levels, though. We're lucky to have specifically Michelle Hughes as our clerk and the staff that work under her. So this is not a criticism of their performance at all. My criticism is simply of the process and basically the policy that's going to come out of it. And the policy that's going to come out of it is that the council is basically been given no choice on the matter, really, aside from we either approve the board boundaries as drawn by one choice that we've been given, or we have the potential, per Clerk Hughes, of going to some sort of, by defaulting to some sort of a at-large system until we were to come up with a new scheme to redraw the ward boundaries. Now, I have no major issues at all with the map that has been presented to us and that we're going to be voting on in just a few moments. It's just, once again, the fact that as a policymaker, we weren't given any choice. I don't think in 8 months or 9 months, however long it takes to get these things going, I don't think having two variations of the map, let alone three, is a big ask. And I don't like being in a situation where, as a council, we're pretty much forced to be a rubber stamp on something. And obviously, 10 years from now, it's a long time out, and I doubt any of us will be in this room at 10 years from now. But if we ever do, I hope we have, as a council, probably sometime sooner than that, we'll have a discussion about what we want to see in terms of our boundary redistricting. Because as I said, at the end of the day, you're going to have several hundred, or whatever the number is, I don't have it in front of me, people that are going to wake up, tomorrow or the next day, and they're going to be represented by a school board and a city council that didn't have any say in. And I like to think that it's not a big ask for us to have at least a debate on that before we do that to the voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So I certainly understand and respect where Councilor Gunn is coming from. I could be wrong, but I think the intent here is to actually remove bias from elected officials in this process. That's the way I looked at it anyway. So I think that, yeah, sure, we're as a body used to having options, but in this particular instance, I think it was so that city clerk does it and there isn't any of our input, because obviously we all would like things a particular way that might benefit us or elected officials at large in general. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And any further discussion? Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I can appreciate Councilor Johnston's sentiment, though, because obviously as an elected official, I am more than aware of wanting to appear unbiased. But like I said during the public hearing, we as a design, going back 30 years at this point, are a nonpartisan body. So when I was looking at the map and had my slight criticisms of it, though, as I said, nothing's going to really, a major issue, though I wasn't looking, it's not like I'm looking for Democratic votes or Republican votes or independent votes. We are a nonpartisan body. I was just looking for a map that just made sense for the people that live there, and you're going to have some neighborhoods invariably are going to be split in odd ways, and I just thought some of them were a little more difficult to accept than the other way. But in terms of us as a nonpartisan body, I think having a nonpartisan body looking at it as opposed to a partisan body is not the worst ask in the world. And like I said, when there's a collaborative aspect of it between a city clerk and a nonpartisan body, I think that's the best way, as opposed to one person deciding on the map, or, obviously, to Councilor Johnson's point, a partisan body deciding, which is the worst possible way.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
No.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. That brings us to item E, a public hearing, Chapter 168 updates on page 20 in your packet. That's Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council updated Chapter 168 during a final reading on December 13th, 2021, adding multiple amendments on the floor. The Codes Department, along with City Solicitor Tim Murphy, have noted a few minor items that were not captured in December. From Attorney Tim Murphy, it is our view that these edits accurately reflect the intentions and vote of the City Council from an earlier meeting. The requested changes were sought by Councilor Berman. However, they were not put into the text, even though the intentions as to them were expressed and were voted upon. As you may know, the city's official code keeper cannot rely upon intentions, nor can they on their own add omitted verbiage or changes that were not made at the hearing via strikes and additions. In short, the only way to properly capture into the code the amendments the council wanted is to re-adopt them. I move to open the public hearing.
Motion is made by Councilor Berman to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch to open the public hearing. Any discussion? Roll call vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing at 7:41 p.m. Members of the public who would like to speak on the item of Chapter 168 updates, or item E in the packet, please come forward and be heard. Seeing nobody seeking recognition, Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to close the public hearing and schedule the final reading for July 11th, 2022.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on closing the public hearing and setting final reading? Roll call vote to close the public hearing and set final reading. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 7:42. That brings us to item F, a public hearing on a petition for zoning map amendment to rezone 4 Woodman Ave from Portland Road, the PR zone, to medium-density residential, the MDR zone, on page 22 in your packet, and it's assigned to Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. By petition, Patrick and Veronica Labby request the City Council consider amending the zoning map to rezone 4 Woodman Ave, map 35, lot 16, sublot 1, from the Portland Road zone to the medium-density residential zone. The subject property abuts an MDR district. The Planning Board voted 7-0 to forward a positive recommendation to City Council during their April 26th meeting. As discussed during the May 16th Council meeting, 2 other Woodman Ave parcels are similarly residential in character and in the PR district. City Council is authorized to amend the zoning map in accordance with city policies and may include these properties in this amendment if appropriate. Staff confirmed that the Caldwells, owners of 9 Woodman Ave, map 35, lot 23, do not have any issues with a potential rezone of their property. Several attempts to contact the Latenders, owners of 13 Woodman Ave, map 35, lot 21, sublot 1, have not yielded a response. I move to open the public hearing.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman to open the public hearing. Any discussion? Roll call vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing at 7:44 PM. Members of the public that would like to speak on item F, petition for zoning map amendment, please come forward and be heard. Seeing nobody seeking recognition, Councilor Purdy.
I move to close the public hearing and schedule the final reading for July 11th, 2022.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion on closing the public hearing, setting final reading for July 11th? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 7:45. That brings us to item G, first reading amendment to section 7.1 of Sacco's zoning ordinance for accessory dwelling units, on page 23 in your packet assigned to Councilor Purdy.
Saco Code Enforcement Office and Fire Department staff propose to amend the performance standards for accessory dwelling units of Section 7.1 of Saco's zoning ordinance. These standards currently require provision of fire sprinklers in new attached ADUs. However, the State Fire Marshal requires fire sprinkler systems also be provided in the existing residence where such ADUs are constructed. Staff finds this all-or-nothing fire sprinkler requirement significantly increases the cost to construct an attached ADU, which conflicts with the city's goals of encouraging infill development and provision of housing that meets the needs of a variety of Saco residents. This amendment would revise Saco's standards by eliminating the sprinkler requirement for new ADUs proposed to be attached to or constructed within existing residences that do not contain fire sprinklers. Other amendments include addition of a clearer and broader purpose statement that is tied to the comprehensive plan and provision of design guidelines for detached ADUs. Saco's Planning Board voted 6-0 during the March 15th, 2022 meeting to forward a positive recommendation to City Council for the proposed amendments. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the amendments to Section 7.1 of Saco's zoning ordinance for accessory dwelling units and schedule a public hearing for July 11th, 2022.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion? Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out that I'm strongly in favor of these changes, and I want to highlight maybe two features that led me to that conclusion. One is Saco is in the middle of an affordable housing crisis. It's simply impossible to find housing for people on a budget in an affordable manner. Creating these ADUs are a key and best practice in solving that problem. Creating additional housing where we already have infrastructure, utilities, and resources is necessary. Second, in other beachfront or tourist communities, sometimes these ADUs can lead to a Airbnb or temporary rental crisis, but that's explicitly prohibited by these changes, where no ADUs can be rented on less than a monthly basis. So it truly is designed to provide affordable housing for people that need it, infill where it can, and solve Saco's problems in an affordable and sensible way. So I think this is a clear win in my book.
Thank you. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I remember wrestling with this at length during the ZORS process, trying to figure out how, we could, what I think many at the time viewed ADUs as in-law apartments. And so the concern obviously there being that, the most vulnerable or one of the more vulnerable populations being seniors would have, a hard time getting out of a unit. So I think that, that was the effort, was to ensure that they were sprinkled. But I would agree that it obviously has made it cost prohibitive. And really what I'm seeing is a trend for these ADUs really not to be senior occupied. There are ways for increasing units throughout communities. So again, I'm supportive of this. But along the same lines that Councilor Berman just brought up when reviewing this, and I think this actually predates the changes for the fire sprinkling. It's part of the standards there, as you just mentioned, as far as it being on a monthly basis. The only question I have is how are we to ensure that? And I'm just, as we move this along, I'm wondering if code or who or whatnot could maybe come up with a fine schedule or how we would go about administering, because I'm aware of several right now in the city that are being Airbnb'd, that are former in-law apartments. So I'd just like to clarify how we plan to, enforce this. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Toomey, do you want to come up and maybe shed some light on that subject of enforcement?
Hello. Basically, anything that's less than a month is transient lodging. Unless they're in a zone that allows it, they can't rent them out for more than less than a month. We do have some Airbnbs out there, but until we, as a city, adopt some plans on how we're going to address Airbnbs, basically, if someone asks, they're not allowed, but we don't go looking for them at this point. But we know they're there, but we just haven't had time to go after everybody who does that.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I had several prior conversations with Mr. Lambert about this and have pushed for this needed ordinance throughout the city. But specific to this, I'm just wondering if, should we come up with a fee schedule or a fining schedule if I were to come to you with an ADU? How do you go about enforcing the no longer than 1 month duration?
Right. Basically, they ask if they can do it for less than a month, we'll say no. If they do it and we know about it, we'll tell them they can't. But as far as taking them to court or whatever, we haven't gone to that step yet.
So could we put a fine in here and then that would give you the ability to fine them? Or should we just clearly spell out we'll revoke the occupancy permit?
Yeah, at this point, they're just in violation of the ordinance, so we could take them to court. Or if, I'm not sure if we just have a fine, we're allowed to do that or not. We'd have to ask legal for that. But
Okay.
we do have ways to go through the courts, but it's not very simple right now.
All right. Thank you.
City Administrator Canrath, can we ask City Solicitor Tim Murphy to weigh in on the ability of the City Council to create a fee schedule or some sort of fine or enforcement action for code enforcement? Thank you. Councilor Berman?
I'd just like to take this opportunity to ask for a short-term rental policy to be on a future agenda, both in terms of creating a permit and licensing schedule, as well as fees for violating our codes.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Councilor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Just a simple
Councilor Hatch,
question.
hold on one
Oh, I'm
moment,
sorry.
if you would.
At this time, we do have seasonal rentals down the beach, and that's the only place we allow it. So basically, we already have the basis in place for doing seasonals, or not seasonals, or temporary or Airbnbs. A lot of other towns have used our ordinance for seasonal rentals as basis for their Airbnbs, so we could expand it to different parts of the city if we want to go there.
Thank you. Councilor Hatch, my apologies.
No problem. Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Just a simple question. Have you defined what attachment means?
Attached by structure. It could be a deck, could be a roof. It has to be a building, something that needs a building permit.
Okay, great. So it's not a 2x4 going from one corner to the other.
That'd be pretty simplistic, but a little bit more than that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? I see no further discussion. A roll call vote on the first reading. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item H, a first reading of a contract zone agreement revision for 66 North Street, page 26 in your packet, and that is assigned to Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. Adam and Deborah Miller, owners of Curl Boutique LLC, purchased the property located at 66 North Street to operate a salon with accessory office space on the first 2 floors and reside on the 3rd floor. which is presently unfinished. The property was previously the site of Carriage House Salon, a day spa business, which was authorized as a personal service establishment at the subject property via a 2004 contract zone agreement between the City of Saco and the previous owners, Russell and Linda Tabout. The 2004 CZA required the following: provision of 14 parking spaces on the premises, 1 space per 200 feet of salon business use, signage limited to 4 square feet in area, exterior lighting limited to the existing plus 1 additional fixture, limits on hours of operation, 9 to 5 Mondays, 9 to 7 Tuesdays through Fridays, and 9 to 4 on Saturdays, limits on number of employees to no more than 6, limits on customers to no more than 6 per 2-hour period, a parking agreement allowing customers of the business at the neighboring property to use the parking lot when the applicant's business was not open. Section 2.1 of the 2004 CZA specifies that the agreement is not transferable. Mr. and Mrs. Miller therefore request an amendment to the previous agreement to authorize continuation of the salon use of the property under their ownership. The Millers propose minor changes to the configuration and uses of the property. According to the application, they intend to reduce the size of the first floor salon space from 2,758 to 2,256.75 square feet, utilize 501.25 square feet of the finished second floor as personal and office space, renovate the unfinished third floor for use as a residence, install signage on an existing post and on the face of the carriage barn. No exterior changes to the site or building or changes to the conditions of approval of the CZA are proposed. The Planning Board will review this proposal during the June 28th, 2022 meeting. Their recommendation will be forwarded to the City Council for the next meeting. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the Contract Zone Agreement revision for 66 North Street, map 39, lot 37, and schedule a public hearing for July 11th, 2022.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? Just as a point of note, we've done this before where we're running an item concurrent, or at the same time as it's going through the planning board, it is going through the city council process. So that is something we have done in the past, and just so there's no accusing of improprieties or anything, we are following protocol that we've done in the past. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I have is typically I like to have the actual contract zone. The revised, it's not in here. It's just showing the 2004. It's not showing what we'd actually be voting on. So I would expect to have it before the public hearing. However, I will vote to push it forward for the interest of time, but it is strange to be voting on a contract zone revision without the actual contract zone revised. Stating some of the intent in the background is good, gives me an understanding what's going on, but in the end, it's a legal document, not a, here's some information. So I would like to have it completed before the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. City Administrator Canrath, can we make sure that gets completed?
Yes, and this will be at the planning board tomorrow evening at their meeting.
Thank you. Councilor Hatch, then Councilor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. So you answered the first question I had about the propriety of this, so I'm good, and I would concur with Councilor Archer's comments here. I find it a little awkward to vote, but I'm happy to move forward. I'm also going to suggest, we've had some issues with contract zones just kind of coming forward. If the one that's in place specifies that the agreement is not transferable, I think it provides us an opportunity to create a whole new contract. And assuming that in that new contract are some of these provisions of limitations on hours and employees, which it seems like the current applicant is willing to adhere to, that we simply get them in there, but try to come up with some ways in which we can confirm compliance with the contract, and I guess that would fall into code enforcement. So I see this as an opportunity to perhaps improve upon the language that's in a contract and simply execute a replacement document that's from start to finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I would agree with Councilor Hatch's comments on that. And then again, along with what the mayor previously spoke to, for anybody that was questioning process or transparency, this was something that I had requested, and I think the request also went to you, Mr. Mayor, to kind of expedite this, given the fact that this applicant had hoped to open early July, and for a variety of reasons, as we all know, we don't meet as frequently, and of course, planning board agendas are packed. They weren't able to get on at an earlier date. Given the fact that at least my tenure on council, I've never, ever heard anything but positive about the previous business use that was there, and doing a little research on the applicant, they seem to have, equally operated another salon in another municipality very well. So to me, it made sense to, when we can, assist somebody that's really just switching out a name and making other minor changes. So I'm supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, if there's no objection, Debbie Miller has asked to speak before the council tonight, so if there's no objection, I'm going to invite her up to speak to the council. Please come forward.
Hi, thank you so much for letting me speak. My name is Debbie Miller. I am owner of the Crow Boutique, and I do have the original. There's one copy if everyone wants to share, but I didn't realize because it's kind of backwards, and we had given all the packets out for tomorrow night. The reason that I am here asking to speak is because, yes, as you suggested or referenced, we wanted to open early July. We've been working with the city. Our original emails date back to March, and unfortunately, in hindsight, I think we could have done a better job of asking some of the questions about the process, but we also were working with first Molly and then Jason, and she left on April 28th, so like I said, I have all the emails out of, we were working to get everything we needed for her, and then when she left, we needed to redo some of it, and somehow it didn't get transferred, the urgency. So here we are tonight, and that's why I'm here, to absolutely beg that there is some creative way. We have a moving company coming this Saturday to move our salon out. We have a full book starting the next week. I have no place to work, and I have, like I said, I have employees, and it's awful, this situation. I'm so stressed about this. So I'm just begging that there is some kind of creative way, temporary. I will sign anything that will follow every rule that Russell and Linda did. We want to be really good neighbors, and like, I love Saco. We're coming from Westbrook. I'm so excited to be down here working with the downtown committee. We're very excited, but I just need a place to work. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you very much. Any questions for council? Okay, thank you very much. Any further discussion on this item? So this item, as City Administrator Canarath said, will be reviewed by the Planning Board at our first reading tomorrow night, and you'll see it back on here July 11th, if you pass it tonight. Okay, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. That brings us to item I, is one reading, sale of 841 to 853 Portland Road, AKA the Clare Parcels. Council, you did receive an email from City Administrator Canrath earlier this evening, or earlier today, so I will let him lead off. City Administrator Canrath.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. City staff had some further discussions with the school department, specifically Superintendent Ray, and just in talking about the school selection site process, they are, as you know, sort of moving forward with another site, but this is still potentially a backup location. I think until that process is completely concluded and set in stone, that it might make sense to hold off on this agenda item. There's no immediate rush to address this, but Economic Development did want to bring it back before you at some point for discussion. Thank you.
Is there any objection to taking this off the agenda for this evening? Councilor Gunn.
Just to be clear, procedurally wise, we're not asking for a tabling motion. We're just going to just take it off. That way, we're pretty much not on any fixed schedule for this. Am I correct on that?
That would be correct.
Okay. And as a follow-up question, it's not as if any party out there has expressed interest in the parcel so far, have they?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
And if there's an objection, we'll take a vote and go through the process, but without objection, we'll remove it from the agenda. So be it. It's removed from the agenda as there's no objection. That moves us forward to item 9, which is new business. We have 2 items under new business. Item A is a pilot presentation from Director Salas on page 47 in your packet. School board members, thank you for hanging in there with us through this evening, and thank you for coming this evening. Have a good evening.
Okay, thank you very much. I won't be presenting anything formal, just sort of reviewing the information that was provided in the memo in the council packet. So a little bit of background. In March of 2021, council approved a policy to govern execution of the city's Chapter 192 ordinance for payment in lieu of taxes. The policy outlined a more robust annual process for gathering information, calculating pilot, and reporting to council. Due to changes in the structure of finance and assessing, the city administrator did approve finance to do a more limited implementation. So in the policy, it outlines that we should survey all tax-exempt property owners every year to establish, their continued tax-exempt status, as well as find out if they have any residence or rental income. We didn't do that survey piece, just again, we're having some staffing challenges in both of those departments. So for this year, I focused just on revising the formula for payment in lieu of taxes based on the policy. So sort of rolled forward tax-exempt entities that we knew had residence and rental income based on previous years, took the formula and applied it just to those properties. As a result of the policy change, total payment in lieu of taxes billed did increase from $61,188 in 2021 to $88,955 in 2022. Most properties did have an increase to their pilot, but one did not change. There was a signed agreement per the property owner that the payment in lieu of taxes was fixed at $5,000. I did reach out for assessing regarding supporting documentation. I asked the tax exempt entity if they had it. There's a file that I have to track down in City Hall that might have that agreement in place. So we just had some challenges with this particular program bouncing around. However, the rest of the properties did go up a little bit. Then, as the second piece of the process, I did go through all the tax-exempt properties I'd received from assessing and applied our payment in lieu of taxes formula to those properties, just using the square footage as a proxy for resident counts. And of course, from that analysis, I did exclude Thornton Academy, where they're more or less a proxy of the city in providing services to our high school students. I also exclude the Dyer Library, where we are funding them at 85% of their annual operating budget, and of course, any properties owned by the city of Saco. There were 58 tax-exempt properties total included in the analysis. Total services costs for tax-exempt entities that do not qualify for pilot per our ordinance was $188,467. This represents about 2% of the net cost to taxpayers of fire, police, and public works. So I would evaluate that the city is not enduring any kind of significant costs related to tax-exempt entities in our city. They're a relatively small portion of the services costs, and I'm sure provide balance services to our community that equal or exceed what the net cost might be in terms of services. I did include a complete list of tax exempt properties so that you could see those that did qualify for payment in lieu of taxes, what that amount was that was billed to them, as well as sort of the estimated services costs of those tax exempt properties that do not qualify. I did receive a question about the Saco Rod and Gun Club, I think from Councilor Berman. They are not included in the tax exempt list because their property actually isn't considered tax exempt by the assessing department. So what not everyone may be aware of is that just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean that your property is automatically tax exempt. There's a significant state statute surrounding what is or isn't a tax exempt property. There's a lot of case law about it. We do have an application available for any nonprofit that would like to be considered for tax exempt process, and they have to go through that application process with our assessing department. When I reached out, it didn't sound like anyone had been added to the tax exempt list in a number of years. So that's everything on the pilot. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Director Salas. Any questions at this time from the council? Seeing no questions, thank you very much. We'll move on to item B now. Pilot abatement for Wardwell. You did receive this memo in your packet on page 52. Director Salas, do you want to update us on this item?
Yes. So, like I had said, some of these formulas changed. Wardwell was one that in total, their payment in lieu of taxes went up about 30%. A lot of that has to do with the number of residents they have. So if you have a significant number of residences, services costs obviously are higher. The organization has sort of requested an abatement of the updated calculation amount. She references an original pilot agreement. Again, I don't have a record of that. I am going to track down the whatever printed documentation we have for payment in lieu of taxes. But my understanding is that they were sort of just, their payment in lieu of taxes was being calculated in the same way as the others, where it was just a 2% of rental income calculation, which had sort of been carried forward as a proxy for estimating services costs in the past. So I'm offering this letter to the council for consideration to get feedback on if this is something you want to move forward with, and if so, we'll put forward a formal request as an action item in July.
Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to know what this agreement is. If there was a flat fee and it's stated that way, then that would be an argument for them. However, I just ran their most recent 2019 990 that I can search, and they have about $13 million worth of assets. So, and they're only requesting, when I hear about abatement, I think abatement is a needs-based program that the city can offer. So I would like to know what the financials are that makes this a need-based request for the reducement of taxes. Or the original agreement that they're referring to, maybe they have a copy, and if it says flat fee and there's no increase, then that's a concern of mine too. But before we provide an abatement, I'd like to definitely want more information. And why do we have a need-based request?
Okay, certainly. I will try and see if I can find any copy of the documentation. I'll follow up with her to see if she has something. In total, they were billed for fiscal year 2022, $37,000 payment in lieu of taxes. And that's up about $10,000 from the previous year. Maybe a little bit less than that, maybe $6,000 or $7,000. So I will follow up with her and perhaps ask that she draft something a little bit more specific, since I think the letter, if you've read it, it's just a couple sentences about budgeting carefully. I'm not sure she specifically lays out where the financial challenges would be in meeting this updated balance.
And the second part for this abatement, is it for Wardwell Common Elderly Housing, or is it for the Wardwell Home for the Aging? The way they present it, the IRS sees it as two different entities.
Yes, she had led me to believe in her email communication to me that this was related to, I believe, the Commons, the smaller bill.
So that.
Yeah, Wardwell Commons, but then she did not specify that information. She mentioned something related to HUD funding, that wasn't in the letter, so I can go back to her and say the council needs a little bit more detail about.
Because the Commons
what
is
the-
about 600,000 in assets. The Home for Aging was about 12 million in change, is what I saw. But again, that was 2019, the most recent uploaded, so obviously there could be a change based on COVID specifically.
Yeah.
Because this was published in 2020, so.
Okay.
Finance Director Salas, in cases of abatement with property tax owners, we've done that in an executive session, so I imagine when this comes back, and will we be doing that in executive session as well?
Well, so the poverty abatement process, which I think you're referencing, has been done in executive session because it requires significant disclosure of personal income information. Where Wardwell does have public filings with the IRS, I don't think it would be required to do it as an executive session item unless Wardwell indicated to us that there was some sensitivity in the information they were required to disclose in order to get this approved by council.
Thank you. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry if you mentioned this already and I missed it in your earlier presentation, but I was under the impression that the pilot program was at least somewhat voluntary for these organizations to take part in. And so I guess I'm wondering how that process works and what would happen if an organization refused or couldn't pay, and what our enforcement mechanisms are.
So Maine state statute allows cities to levy payment in lieu of taxes on a non-voluntary basis by communities. You have to opt in, which obviously the city has because we have an ordinance on the books. And I do believe it needs to be services-based, which is why we updated the formula to try and take net cost to taxpayer of these specific services and sort of look at square footage of the property versus total square footage in the city and say, okay, well, this is basically the share of services that we can attribute to your organization. But it's not voluntary where the tax exempt property is generating rental income. The reason that we have the additional tax exempt properties and their estimated services costs is to provide information to the council. If you were to say, okay, well, this particular organization on this list, significant services costs, we think we should engage in an agreement. More common in municipalities that have something like a UNE, where you have significant property valuation, significant services costs attributable to a nonprofit entity, and you're looking to kind of recoup some of those costs. Where we're down at 2% of net services costs. It's something the council is certainly allowed to request, but that would be more of a voluntary agreement.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any further discussion on this item? Is there, seems to be a consensus that much more information is needed before this comes before City Council for any kind of action. So, Finance Director Salas, can you try to obtain more information so that the council can look at this at a future date?
Absolutely. I'll reach out to the finance director over at Wardwell and see if she can put together something a little bit more robust. And maybe she can attend the next session and provide some additional information on their specific need of Wardwell and why this revised amount would be a challenge.
That would be greatly appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you. That completes new business. That brings us to item 10, administrative updates. City Administrator Canrath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few updates from our finance department. The department works with Saco schools and our partners at Paco and Carroll to go to market on the city's insurance coverage. And we're happy to announce that the total savings for taxpayers as a result of this exercise are expected to be at least $100,000, with the city side alone enjoying about $77,000 in savings. So thank you to all senior staff who provided significant help and documents in this effort. The Finance Department would also like to announce that LifeQuest has been selected as the city's new collections agency. LifeQuest was selected because of their expertise and experience, especially in ambulance billing collections, as well as their knowledge and sensitivity to the unique needs of municipalities in collecting unpaid debt. The department is also continuing to work existing ambulance accounts with over 500 final notice letters sent to date and another 150 letters expected to be sent out by the close of the month. The council will begin placement with LifeQuest after the close of this current fiscal year in just a few days. A reminder, senior tax assistance program applications must be complete and submitted to the Finance Department by July 1st at 4 p.m. The department has already reviewed 72 forms and is working with citizens to get all the necessary paperwork in by the deadline. The Customer Service Department took the initiative to mail out forms to last year's recipients, as the deadline was much earlier in the year than for the 2023 program. This has ensured continued participation in the program for our most vulnerable citizens in that population. Upcoming council agenda preview, July 11th, we'll have a charter amendments discussion. We'll have the certification of election results. Chapter 168 will be in final reading. The Woodman Avenue zoning map amendment will be in final reading. ADU sprinklers will have a public hearing. The CZA for 66 North Street, we will have the public hearing. Buxton Road sewer line move, first reading, and a highway easement for Maine DOT will be in first reading. Have a few city RFP opportunities to announce. The city of Saco seeks bids for technology vendors for a computer replacement project. Proposals will be accepted until July 31st at 12 noon. Please email our IT director, Ryan Pinero, with the subject computer replacement, or you can mail those also to Ryan Pinero, 300 Main Street, Saco, Maine, 04072. All proposals must include PDF labeled computer replacement, and any questions, please direct them to the department. The next one is soliciting bids for the Route 1 Cascade Road, Flag Pond Road, traffic signal, and roadway improvements. Bids must be submitted in the bidder response form in a sealed envelope marked Route 1, Cascade Road, Flag Pond Road, traffic signal, and roadway improvements. The deadline for this one is July 20th. There will be a public bid opening at that time at the Public Works Department. And lastly, proposals for our FY23 capital financing schedule. The total amount to be financed is $1,067,386 over 5 years. Please submit those proposals to our Finance Director, Glenn Salas, by July 11th at 5 p.m. For more details, please see our website under the bids section. Lastly, I just want to also take a moment, since Glenn is here, to thank our Finance Department in light of our, I think, excellent audit presentation and the results of the city's finances and where they currently stand. I think we couldn't be more proud of all those numbers, where we are. And so thank you to everyone involved, staff, and especially our Finance Department for leaving us in this condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for City Administrator Canrath? Seeing no questions, moving on to item 11, council discussion and comment. Any council discussion and comment this evening? Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like for us to take a minute to reflect upon the recent Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what, if any, role a Saco city councilor could have in the aftermath of that decision. This is a national issue, not one that affects Maine or Saco, at least today. And I spent some time thinking there was nothing to be done from this seat. But I've come to a little different perspective, because sometimes just speaking is doing something. And while I wish I lived in a world where all people were treated equally, that's just not the case. When I walk through the world, I walk with privilege. Sometimes it appears that our society bends just to accommodate my wants and needs. There's nothing I've done to deserve this privilege. It's an accident to my birth. It's maintained by both historic and current economic and political structures. But the privilege is real, and my life is easier for it. When I speak, people listen. Sometimes, like now, my words are broadcast to the world. I can even lose an election and still end up with this seat. But critically, I've never had the government restrict or prohibit a medical procedure that I thought I needed, nor compel me to use my body in the service of others. My daughters, my wife, and my friends perhaps cannot now say the same. I believe it behooves those of us who live with these special powers, this influence, and this privilege to use our bodies and voices as a shield to protect those who are vulnerable and still fighting for their rights, for their safety, and for their privilege. Sometimes a shield is not enough, but we need to become a spear, helping lead the efforts to ensure equality and justice for those whose voices are not being heard. So it's with these thoughts in mind that I want to say unequivocally that I find it simply unacceptable to live in a society where adult human beings do not have full bodily autonomy, where they do not have the right to determine what happens with and to their own bodies. While the particular issue of abortion may appear to affect women more than men, this is really not a gendered issue. Once we decide that the government has the power to regulate our physiology, to decide what we do with our organs, our blood, our bodies, then we're all at risk of being regulated. So while an ordinance passed by Sacco would have no meaning, I felt compelled to use this time and my voice to call on all of us to stand together, to fight for freedom, dignity, and privacy for everyone. I especially want to call on our elected federal delegation to restore the rights of all Americans to bodily autonomy. While many people have expressed similar sentiments, I want to directly quote Emma Lazarus, who once said, "Until we are all free, we are none of us free." I want to be free, and I want those I love to be free. And so I'm hoping all of us can work together to end this madness and restore freedom and bodily autonomy to all Americans. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Any further council discussion and comment? I just want to shout out to Saco Main Street and for their efforts for the art festival this past weekend. On Saturday, it was a great event, well attended. There were several more pre-pandemic levels of artists and vendors there. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that attended and thank you to Saco Main Street. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This actually comment was for, and I think I heard you do what I was about to do as well. So if so, you can join in. But I'll apply it to what the mayor just stated too, but to Councilor Berman's statement, here. And I'll even apply it to you as well, Mr. Mayor, with Saco Main Street.
Thank you. Any further council discussion and comment? Councilor Gunn.
Yes, to be on the record, that was my here, and I just want to be on the record, fully associate myself with Councilor Berman's comments, and I will gladly answer the question if anyone ever asks me how I feel on that statement, on the issue of Roe v. Wade, but I will say this. However you feel about it, not only was the constitutional protection for a woman's right to choose gutted by the Supreme Court, the entire notion of a right to privacy was the main reasoning behind that constitutional right being shut down, and the fact that they simply say that there's no inherent right to privacy. So whether you applaud this decision or you're abhorred by it, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court of the United States just pretty much said that you do not, as an American citizen, which just means a Maine citizen, which means a citizen of Saco, have an inherent right to privacy. That should alarm anyone and should motivate anyone to, if not vote for people, to work for people, to do what we did, get 35 signatures and get involved and run for office and try to make a difference, because we're the government. There's no magic people out there that make these decisions. If you show up, you make the decisions. And we have a court that made these decisions. We had people who were elected that put them there, and be the change that you want to be, because if you're not, the world will change in a way that you won't like, and you'll wake up all of a sudden, like the women of America have, and find most of their large constitutional right they thought they had gutted. And that's something that should give us all pause as we continue on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further council discussion and comment? Thank you. That brings us to item 12. Is there a motion to enter executive session?
So moved.
Councilor Purdy, can you
yeah, I
read
gotta
into
read
the,
it.
thank you.
Be it ordered that the city council enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Subsection 4056, for D, city administrator's contract negotiation.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion? Roll call vote to enter executive session. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to enter executive session at 8:28. Executive session will be downstairs in the conference room. Okay, welcome back. At 8:41, I'll entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Councilor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Purdy, any discussion on coming out of executive session? Roll call to exit executive session. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 8:41. That brings us to item 13, a report from executive session. Councilor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. I will make a motion to authorize the mayor to execute with the city administrator employment agreement with the effective date of November 14th, 2022, and will remain in full force and effect for 3 years until and through November 13th, 2025.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hatch to approve, or to authorize the mayor to enter into a contract with the city administrator for city administrator services through November 13th, 2025. Is there a motion, or is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 14. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Councilor McPhail, is there a second?
Second?
Second by Councilor Hatch to adjourn. Any discussion? Roll call to adjourn. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to adjourn at 8:43 PM. Have a great evening, everybody.
All right. Hopefully nobody will be yelling at us when we go out. What's that? There was somebody yelling as we were coming into the...